Huples Cat. For some reason, the topic of cold weather has become trending this week. Now, little Wolfy has been adopted very recently up in here in Canada, Toronto, and he came from South Carolina and he doesn't really like the cold. He's starting to get used to it, as you shall see. So how do you deal with the cold, Wolfy? Well, you stay inside, right? So if you're an American like Wolfy and you're not used to the cold, what do? Well, as you've seen, I've layered him up. But what do we do up here? So the first thing is basic stuff. If you're in Texas and you've got a cold snap, you need to have equipment like this, or like this. What you don't want to have on is cotton. Cotton is not a base layer. You need to have nylon fabric, preferably some good quality sporting gear. But nylon's a good idea. You do not want to have anything that retains moisture. You will sweat however cold it is. And if that water gets into the first layer next to your skin, it allows the heat to be sucked right out of the surface of the skin externally. You don't really want that. So Survival Living's in Florida and he was talking about the cold, and 98% of what he said was true. There was like a 2% part, which I'm going to show now.
Dude, I heard if I put a tent up in the room, I'll be able to stay warm. Maybe 1 to 2 degrees. That tent is just to bounce and radiate your body heat and to keep wind from the outside crossing your body and you're getting the wind chill temperature. If you have no way of generating heat and you're sitting in a tent inside your house and it's below 0, you're not staying warm. Now if you have a way to power up a small electric heater and you're inside that tent, yes. But if you have no way of creating power and you're sitting in a tent, sitting in a room and it's below 0, you're gonna freeze your ass off. Get in your car, crank up your car, sit with that heater.
Survival Living's in Florida. He was talking about the recent cold snap and why it's a disgrace that people weren't prepared for it. And I can agree and disagree with that. It depends on your socio-economic circumstances, etc. But he specifically said that for those people talking about raising a tent inside their house with no power to stay warm, it won't work. It'll raise the temperature by 1 or 2 degrees, if that. I'm sure he's talking about Fahrenheit, not centigrade. Well, yes and no. If there's no power, the house will rapidly become, in about a 24-hour period or sooner, almost the same temperature as the external environment. What I would recommend if you have no power sources, and I would recommend you have power sources, either a wood stove or a portable wood stove or a portable propane heater or even a generator. Bear in mind, propane and generators will run out, so think about how much money you're spending for how much use it would be in a prolonged SHTF. But a tent inside a house works. It doesn't work the way people are using it, I agree. What you need to do is you have to have an external heat source in that room. For example, my living room has a wood fireplace. It's not a great one, it's more of a decorative one, but it works. It generates some heat. I do have other sources of heat. So if you put a mattress from upstairs on the floor, get yourself off the floor. That's the critical thing here. Do not be direct contact to the floor. That will suck heat out of your feet. Put a mattress down, put a tent over the top of that, put plastic in the windows, double layer plastic with duct tape or nails or both, plastic up over all the windows and all the doors, and create a dome using the tent on top of the mattress in front of a small candle even will work for this. Not inside the tent or close to the tent, you will burn to death, and have a fire extinguisher with you, and then have a decent sleeping bag. You will actually generate heat which will rise into the atmosphere and hit the top of the tent and then actually increase the temperature. Not hugely. This is the same function and same science as people use when they make igloos, okay? So here I am, inside the igloo. No chimney, and it's kind of slippy. That's the way out. Alrighty, so yeah, get out in the snow and enjoy yourself. Think about alternative methods of staying warm and out of the wind, and where you have snow, an igloo is actually a great idea. Toodaloo.
Alright, emerging from hibernation. One Huples cat.
It's the same idea. If you just have a non-heated room with a general cheap tent and you're going in and out of it, he's exactly right. It's not going to do very much for you. But if you actually constrain yourself and stay in sleeping bags with layers and flannels and heads covered and all the rest of it, inside a tent on a mattress, the temperature inside the tent will rise. Now it's never going to get toasty. If you can get it to just under or just over freezing, that is exactly where you should be grateful and glad that you got it to that temperature. So that's how igloos work. They raise the temperature to around about 0 degrees. 0 degree temperature, you have a freezing point. I know Fahrenheit's different, I have no idea what's it. The freezing point of water, when water turns to ice. If you can get to that temperature or slightly higher than that, your chances of survival are much, much safer. For example, at 5 degrees centigrade, if I'm running, I wear shorts, a pair of gloves and a normal t-shirt. That's adequate for me because of the heat I'm generating. Without utilities, without an external power source, the heat you generate by eating and living is the heat that you want to trap around you to reduce the radiation of heat from you into the cold external. And that's what you need to be thinking. Now, another quick tip for people out there is if you have a sleeping bag, and you all should, I've seen the sleeping bags people have in Texas. They're absolutely rubbish, mostly. And a lot of people online are going to go out and buy military 4-layer sleeping bags and stuff like that. You actually don't really need them. What you need is a generous, cheap $10 sleeping bag. You need to have a silk insert, which needs to be fairly expensive from a camping store. And then you want to have a look at getting the best available sleeping bag that will fit inside the cheap one that fits you. And then when you get in the sleeping bag, you're going to be fairly fully dressed. You're not stripping off to your undies or less and sleeping comfortably without power in the cold. You don't wash, you don't bathe. What you need to be doing is spot washes of the stinky bits. Don't shave, don't do any of that stuff until you get power back on. Now, in a long-term grid down where it's icy cold for the entire winter, like what I would face in Toronto, I have different plans. What I'm talking about here is a short-term polar vortex with some power outages in your area. I'm not talking about prepping for a nuclear winter, I'm not talking about anything else. But the basics you need to cover for that sort of thing is what I've just talked about. And you need to think seriously about how prepared are you if the utilities shut off in your house for 7 days. As you can see, today's not that cold. It's been a lot colder, we've been down to minus 30, but it's not too bad. So as you can see, the temperature gradient is round about minus 40 centigrade. Is a little bit warmer than minus 40 Fahrenheit. So for those of you in America, you can figure this out. So on a day like today with very little wind, and wind is another major factor, I will just wear my t-shirt and my coat and a pair of gloves and maybe a hat that I'll take on and off as I get warm. So you want to have a good coat. Watching the newscasts out of Texas, they don't seem to have very good coats. Anyway, it's a Canadian made coat made by Wolfy, and I've had it for about 3 years now, and I have a video on it. And it has some nice features. One of the nice features are, if you go shopping, you can do this with it, and you can actually put this into your own clothing, and then you don't have to worry about being too hot inside a mall, but you can easily just put this straight back on when you go out to the car or to the bus or to walk home. So a good coat will have a hood. The hood will be fairly big. The hood will also be insulated. That's a common design fault, is hoods are just shells. And it will have a zipper. The reason you don't particularly want buttons is you don't want to be messing around with buttons because it means taking gloves off. So you put the coat on like this, and you have straps here that you can adjust to make this a lot tighter, and there you go. Now I'm already getting really hot indoors, and in truth, if you live in Texas, you don't really need a coat like this. But the truth is, climate change is causing the hot air of the Antarctic to actually move and alter the polar vortex. So polar vortex moving south is going to be a fairly common feature as carbon dioxide continues to rise in the atmosphere and as the Antarctic and the Arctic, specifically in our case, starts to melt. So get yourself the best coat you can afford, right? That's the bottom line. If you hardly ever wear it because you live in Texas, it's going to last you the rest of your life, so make sure it has some give in it. You also want to make sure that you can actually layer underneath this. Like I say, today I only need this. And I have, this is a Canadian invention called a scarf. Scarves are great because what they do is they prevent the heat rising out of the body and out of the neck. So they're a good idea. You can also, of course, use scarves as an inadequate anti-COVID device or as a device to stop you getting cold. And this is how I put mine on because I live in Toronto. You know, I see it differently. You want the ears covered, the nose covered, and the mouth covered, and it will get frozen. There you go. Pretty much with the hood on, the wind can't hit me. But what about my hands? Hands get cold, right? Gloves. I use sporting gloves for most of my stuff because I used to be an athlete many years ago. And I find they're expensive but lightweight and functional and last a long time. Now down to about minus 20 centigrade these work fine, but beneath that they actually start to get cold. But we thought of that. A nice thick wool glove can go on top of these, and the reason wool's so great as long as it's dry is that it has lots of air in it, and that gets hot from you and prevents the cold getting in. So this is pretty a mitten, and it functions by pushing the fingers together. Now the reason I have it like this is because when I'm out and about and I have to pick up dog poo or something like that, I can do this with one hand, functional, and then put this back on. Now what do you do on a really, really cold day when it's minus 40 centigrade or minus 40 Fahrenheit? Well, you need snowmobile gloves. Simple as that. Snowmobile gloves are specifically designed to ride like this on a snowmobile at speed in the cold with the wind chill being really bad. And this is already starting to really heat up, so I'm going to take it off. But what do you do if you haven't got all of this gear and you don't live in a cold weather area and it gets suddenly cold? Have a look around December, January in grocery stores and in pharmacies. You'll find like $1 woolen gloves. Get 2 or 3 pairs of them in various sizes so you can layer them on. That works. But there is something that I believe Rob Painless from Texas actually taught me a while ago, which I have tried and does work. Nitrile gloves. Yeah, I'm serious. On their own, they're not going to be much use to you. But if you use them as the base layer, the inner layer, because they are waterproof to some degree, if you put them on like this and then put 1 or 2 or 3 pairs of $1, $2 cheap gloves on, you're actually going to have a really decent areas of air building up and you're going to stay warm. And I have tried this, and I believe it was Rob, and if it wasn't you, Rob, I apologise, but if it was you, thank you. It actually works really, really well. And it also allows fine mobility, which is very, very important in a SHTF or in life. When you're out in the snow, you can actually function and do things. So with a general pair of running gloves, which again designed for running in the cold with the wind on them, so that's why I use them. They've also got some grips on them that are fading over time. Tell I'm right hand dominant. Works well, and you can reuse them of course. If you take them off gently and slowly, this isn't the way to take them off for infections, but if you want to reuse them as a glove, this is how to do it. Take your time, ready to reuse. If you're having trouble getting it off, this is an old nursery trick. Works. Now I mentioned a scarf for your face, and that's always a good idea, but sometimes scarves can be uncomfortable. Well, what else could you use in 2021 if there's a wind chill and your cheeks and your face are getting frozen? It works, and it's better than nothing. And of course you can always put 2 masks on, which is probably one of the better uses of 2 masks, and you actually have then got the protection there. So that's your hands and your face to some degree sorted out. Well, what do you do about your feet? I'm going to try and find a video from old school Prepper Martha where she cuts up insulation and puts them as a pad under your feet.
Hi you guys. So I have a little tip for you since it's winter time and my feet get super cold in the winter. Yours may or may not, but maybe your kids do or your wife's do, and you're busting out the old boots. Mucks are my favorite brand around the house, but whatever brand you use. These will work for snow boots or pretty much any kind of a shoe that you have a little extra room in. If you pull out the insole from the boot, and get yourself some of this insulation, you know, it's got the little bubbles in it. 1 insole down, and then just sketch around it. Maybe that's a little more under hand, and then we'll cut out your teeth. And then I take the other one and I just flip it upside down like this side by side because it just saves room. I don't like the anyway. The side I have here from last year, I need to replace it. It's pretty worn out, but what I'm going to do with this is put it in my boot. Here, I put it in my boot. I put my insole in my boot. Now I put my new insulated insole in my boot.
However, what I have tried and does work, though it's a little noisy, is those emergency blankets. If you pull out the inside of your sole of your shoe and make a template with that and then cut just cheap plastic Mylar emergency silver foil blankets with the silver side and put it underneath the sole, then put the sole back in, they actually work to some degree. I don't generally have problems with my feet. Reason being is I wear running shoes and decent woolen socks all the time, or decent high grade nylon type socks all the time. I don't really find I get problems with my feet. But on really cold days, I do. If it's minus 40 centigrade Fahrenheit, although I'll wear an inner layer of socks, normal socks for me, and a pair of socks like this. Again, you want to invest in 2 or 3 pairs of these and have them lying around. If you only use them on a rare cold day, they will be lasting for a lifetime. Cotton socks, never ever wear. So if it's a really cold day, I'm going to wear a base layer like this, and I'll put a sweatshirt on. If I am still cold with this system on, because I know the temperatures, and you get to follow the temperatures daily, look at what the wind chill is, look at the actual temperature and figure out what works best for you. It's something like this. Quite easy to get. It's artificial fibres, so it's not great for the environment, but whatever. And it's long sleeve, and I'd put this on and then maybe a sweatshirt on top of it. So I would have 3 to 4 layers on my hands, my feet and my chest in a really cold day. Now for my legs, what I use again is running tights underneath my normal trousers, which are not jeans, they're not cotton. It's an artificial fibre as usual, because it works a lot better to stop the wind and also to allow me to sweat, so I don't get problems with cold. Now what do I do for your hat? Currently I'm wearing this. It's not very useful because it's a bit loose. It's from a local brewery that started out. So I kind of wear this, and it can pull down over the ears, which is really important. And when I get too hot, I take it off, put it in the pocket. When I start to cool down again, I put it on again. Same for the scarf, same for having this open or shut or fully up. Do not ever allow yourself to sweat. Sweat will kill you when it's cold. Now I do have all of this gear floating around, but I actually was digging around and I found some stuff. This is a running hat, and as you can see, I got it for $15 Canadian. I always buy stuff on sale at the off season for running gear, it's good. And it actually goes on like this. Now this one is hanging around because it's actually for kiddies, mine's somewhere else. So if you put this on as a skull cap, again make sure the tips of the ears, if the gears aren't covered, and then put this on top of it, you have a double layer protection. A bit tight for me because it's, like I say, this is actually kiddies. Because I'm a prepper, I have a whole bunch of stuff specifically for bugging out or for use in SHTF in addition to our regular gear. Pair of Deodora running gloves for the inside layer for kiddie, pair of gloves on the outside for kiddie. She just used these, and as you can see they are very soft. I'm not a huge fan of these, a lot of people are. I'm not really keen on them. I don't find them that useful. Kind of geeky looking, and I'm not really a big fan of it because the heat goes out the top. Now for those of us of a certain age or a certain disability, I am functionally disabled, you might be wearing glasses. Now mine need cleaning, but I can tell you absolutely, if you are going to live in cold areas or you're going to experience severe cold like minus 20 centigrade or minus 40 Fahrenheit, those sorts of temperatures, really extreme cold, biting cold, where you walk out the door and your nostril hairs freeze, that's when you know it's cold. If your nostril hairs don't freeze, it's not that cold. You absolutely can't have glass frames. You absolutely cannot have metal frames. Absolutely, you'll actually burn yourself. You have to have plastic frames. Now I did a video on this. These are Dresden glasses. You can get a recent prescription from your optometrist and you can pay for these, and they'll cost about $40 Canadian. And they're not the greatest lens, but they're not a bad lens, and they're very cheap. And you can get multiple copies of them in case you break them and grit down, so you won't be blind or using duct tape. Another thing you might want to invest in is something like this. They're fairly expensive for what they are, but again, buy them off season. These are designed for runners. This is an American company. And basically what it is, it's a face shield for your face, designed purely for cold. And the reason it's a good thing is because it has holes here and here, so you can breathe heavily. And they're a good idea. I have one and I use it on extremely cold days. This sort of hat you've seen me wearing actually last winter. It's actually a good idea, and you can tighten it if it's windy, which you don't really need to. And it makes you look kind of daft. But it's good because it's got lots of air in it. As long as it stays dry, it's not raining, this will be incredibly warm, and it completely covers the ears, which is the critical part, and the forehead up to the eyelashes. On really strong wind days, this would be inadequate. I'd actually need extra padding here to prevent a painful headache from the cold. So I'm just going to finish this video up with a little Wolfy walk in the snow. Come with me and I'll probably be too hot. So when it gets really cold, your lakes and your ponds and even your rivers will freeze solid. So you need to have a plan to get water out of these before it goes really cold. You need to have a thought process about how you're going to maintain access to water if it's going to be very, very cold. Oh, Wooly spotted a dog. So there are natural areas where you can actually get water, where it'll come out. And you want to maintain them using sticks and buckets during the winter season. This is a public small park in Newmarket, just north of Toronto. And it's quite easy to walk on this because a lot of other people have been walking on it, so it's actually padded down. But I will try and take Wolfy off track and we'll see. Oh, don't eat yellow snow. Never eat yellow snow. So your rivers can become roadways and are often used for that, both historically and to this day in Canada. Once the water gets frozen enough, drive cars on it, and it becomes a lot easier to access places by water that's frozen than it ever is by road in the winter. Where's Wolfy going? Yeah, Wolfy, come on. As you can see, as soon as he moves slightly off, the going gets a lot tougher for the poor little bite. Oh, Wolf, so go back. That's it for me and Wolfy. Another major snowstorm's coming down tonight and tomorrow. So we'll be doing more shoveling. And get out there, layer up, enjoy it. Don't be caught napping. SHTFs are often the SHTF we don't expect. So expect the unexpected. Cover the basics. Heat, cooling, food, water, shelter, safety. Cover them. Cover them as well as you can. Because you never know. If you like this video, please give us a subscription. It will help me be able to feed Wolfy. And have a great day. Bye. This has been a 2021 Arctic Terrier production.